Well, thank you, Miguel. I appreciate the intro and thanks for having me here. Also, thanks to everybody online for taking time out of their busy day to join us. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Silicon Valley way and how we here, a lot of us in the Valley kind of work together to understand that, and how I took my perspective of that Silicon Valley way and I kind of integrated it into my martial arts training. So when people ask me, in the last several years, I get the question a lot: what makes an entrepreneur? What makes the Valley so unique? The answer I often give is this warrior ethos, right? And this warrior ethos is how people think about doing business, how people think about solving problems. And when I tie it back to how I learned it, I came up with this class called Everything I Know About Business. I learned from Bruce Lee. He was very inspirational. And today I'm going to talk about those lessons learned and how that inspiration and the fact that I was fortunate enough to kind of grow up in Silicon Valley combined to give me and my teams a unique perspective on how to do business. Next. So today we'll talk about the concept, a little background on it, and how important leadership is to the Silicon Valley way and developing this business warrior ethos. And then, as often is the case, concepts are nothing without a practical application. So I'll end my discussion with how I applied this to one of my companies, a company called AMG, Applied Manufacturing Group, which is an advanced manufacturing and automation solutions company. And we'll talk a little bit about the operational side. We call it business combatives, right? How to manage the chaos that is a manufacturing operation and global supply chain. And then I will wrap it up with a summary and a Q&A. Next. One more. So the goal here is to develop this warrior ethos. I've spent the last 45 years in this valley as a CEO, as an investor, as a educator, a researcher, lots of different roles, and it all comes down to how you develop this and provide these proven Silicon Valley leadership skills to engineers, entrepreneurs, and execs around the world in preparation for this fourth industrial revolution. That's another common thread in this talk today. We'll be talking about what we like to call the mechanization of the internet. That's Industry 4.0. That's the new paradigm shift that's occurring in terms of product technology. And a lot of us that are in the habit of manufacturing hardware need to be prepared for that. Next, please. So why Bruce Lee? People ask me this all the time. Well, there's two answers here. One is he was a big inspiration to me and millions of other people around the world. And two, when I was asked to do a class at Draper University, which is a very fringe kind of alternative education system developed by Tim Draper, who's one of the world's most well-known venture capitalists, I had to teach the class there, and there's 100 CEOs in my class from around the world. So I had to pick a kind of mechanism, right? An icon, if you will, that was recognized by everybody. And Bruce Lee is one of those people. So that's how his teachings and things not only inspired me, but allowed me to develop this courseware. So why Bruce Lee? Well, he was a great martial artist. We know that, and a movie star, but he was also a great entrepreneur and very, very well versed in self-improvement. He was also a philosopher. A lot of people don't realize that. In fact, when people ask me what are the big lessons from Bruce Lee, it's less about fighting, right? I train in multiple disciplines, but it's more about the way he improved himself and the people around him. He founded something called JKD, which stands for Jeet Kune Do, which we'll discuss in a moment. And he's the father of MMA, which is mixed martial arts, which is the biggest revolution the martial arts world has seen in over 1,000 years. Next slide. So what is Jeet Kune Do? Well, it means the way of the intercepting fist, and it's just a way of being very fluid. He always said, be like water, be very fluid, be very adaptable. And he always said, don't be rigid, right? His famous saying is the way of no way. So what he said was, if you're going to learn to fight, there's multiple dip systems. You should not get caught up in one or two. You should take and borrow from other systems and adapt it. So this adapt or die philosophy is probably the biggest takeaway. When I was a little kid, I learned from them, where you absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is uniquely your own. If you look at some of the best entrepreneurs in the world, Steve Jobs comes to mind. He did this, right? Might not have referred to it in this way. Maybe he wasn't inspired by Bruce Lee or another philosopher, but people sometimes naturally do it. So if you take this adapt or die maxim and apply it and look at how Steve Jobs used it when he went on the tour of Palo Alto Research Center, which was the local Xerox R&D think tank, he absorbed what he saw on the tour, right? He said, oh, this is useful. This is great tech. He threw out what didn't work. There's a lot of stuff that the PhDs were coming up with that didn't have commercial applications. And then he added what was unique to him and Steve Wozniak, right? They added what was uniquely your own. So it's a great way to exemplify the ability to adapt and to modify and build on a foundation that has worked before in other applications. Next slide, please. So we talk a lot about balance, or the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, when you're studying Bruce Lee's teaching. And since then, I've adapted that to business. So it's all about balance and integration and harmonizing. I built a company that, can you back up a little bit, Miguel? One slide. I built a company that sold for a lot of money, and we only had one patent. And people said, how did you do this? And it's because we balanced intellectual property, the development of intellectual property, with the monetization of intellectual property. So the ability to develop new technology was balanced out by the ability to monetize and build or manufacture that technology. So once we had that IA, the asset structure, and the IP, the technology balanced, we were able to blow away our competition. So this little symbol here has had a profound effect on my business career. And I have another slide to quantify that a little more. Next slide. So here's another comparison. So this is about balance. So you can apply it to martial arts, or in my case, an MBA, because I teach a full-blown course on this. So another way to balance something is in my fighting career and martial arts training, I came up as a traditional martial artist, right? Working on developing chi and doing forms and structure. And then Bruce and others introduced this concept of reality-based martial arts. So and that you become a more accomplished fighter, a more accomplished warrior, right? And warriors are fighters and diplomats. They're balancing that out. So I did this with my MBA training, right? There's a lot of good MBA stuff you learn in business school, but if you don't want an over-reliance on that, you want to balance it out with real world capability. So if you're an executive and running medium-sized big companies, you should learn how entrepreneurs run small companies. If you're an entrepreneur, you should learn how the executives run large companies. So I've run 6-person companies, 60-person companies, and 600-person companies, and kind of balance that out into that yin-yang symbol we saw earlier. And I'm still learning and developing, but compared to a lot of other managers, I think me and my team are a lot closer to having the integrated and harmonized skills you need to survive, especially in this new business world we're calling Industry 4.0. Next slide, please. So just a little slide here that kind of showed a specific lesson, right? This is a great example of a specific lesson. So when I transitioned from traditional martial arts training to reality-based martial arts or mixed martial arts, Bruce said, look, there's 4 ranges. He really had 5, but he never talked about the 5th one because it didn't fit with his Hollywood career. But Bruce was really sharp. He said, look, the human body can only kick a certain way, a punch a certain way, clinch, grapple, whatever. So we should learn the skills that are best in those 4 or 5 ranges. And that's what this is. So the reason why I show this slide is because after I cross-trained in this and really boosted my martial arts training, I took this same template and applied it to business. And I asked the question, what are the 5 ranges of business, right? What do I have to learn as an individual entrepreneur and executive to excel, and what does my company have to develop to be cross-trained and multidisciplined. So this was the template. Let's talk about how we applied it. Next. So we did 4 ranges first, the 4 core ranges. So we started looking at it. I kind of integrated with something I learned years ago when I was taking TQM classes, the Deming wheel. So I noticed a correlation between that and plan, do, check, act. But the net result was I realized I need to understand financial planning and analysis, business strategy, and tech development, operations, and then how to manage risk and improve things. So once I started focusing on that, my career took off. People always ask me, especially when I teach, what school did you go to? You know, do you have an advanced degree, a PhD? I say, no, I didn't go to very fancy schools. Don't have a PhD, but I do have these 4 ranges that are very important in your everyday business problem solving. So next slide, please. Now the 5th range, weapons range, is venture funding and building, right? And this is the last range that I added. In martial arts training, you learn weapons last, and in business, you know, you never learn. Most people never learn about venture capital, and it's a very secretive thing. It's just like your instructor doesn't want you to teach you weapons. And that's why it's not even called a range. I had to kind of bring it into, because they don't want you to be able to really defend yourself, right? I mean, weapons is the best defense. You look at a cop, a special operations person, they all go weapons first. When you lose your weapon, then you go hand to hand, right? The Filipino martial arts are really good. They teach weapons first. So I was inspired by that. So in my business career, unfortunately, I learned the 5th range later. I wish I would have learned about venture capital and venture building sooner. And I'll talk about that in a moment, because it is probably the most important range that ties everything together. Next slide, please. So this is an actual model. So I'm working on a software program called Black Diamond, where I'm bringing corporate venture tools and techniques into the small and medium business arena, especially with women-owned and minority-operated businesses. And they have never been exposed to the tools and the ability to grow your business through corporate venture, private equity, and even investment banking techniques, right? They don't even understand that world. So I mapped out those 5 ranges of fighting into 5 core ranges of business, and then I adapted it to 5 capital elements and structure of a business. So now when I go into businesses, whether I start them, invest in them, or advise them, I'm always looking at the company with these 5 elements, right? Talent, which we call human capital; intellectual property, which is your tech; the infrastructure, which we call asset capital; the quality systems that apply everywhere, we call that process capital; and finally, what people typically associate with CVC or venture capital investment. So you start to, just like we took martial arts and looked at our careers when we were young engineers and really saw a different way of developing. You take this capital structure and you look at companies this way. You have a different lens, right, with which to view the company and your roadmap. Next slide. And just to show you, sorry for the small font here, I don't know what happened, but just to show you this stuff really works, because in martial arts, it's kind of funny, right? There's a lot of people that are very trained, but they've never fought, or they've never taught, or they've never competed. But in business, there's a lot of people with fancy degrees and things, but they've never really applied it, right, in a high-risk environment. And that's the test of a real martial artist. So the best teachers I ever had were people that were military, law enforcement, bodyguards, bouncers, because they actually used it, right? It's real. They had real world experience. I met Chuck Norris before, talked to, when he talks about the fact that he has a black belt, he said, look, I've never been in a real fight in my life. I don't know how good I am, but I look good on TV. Business is like that, right? There's a lot of MBAs and PhDs and people that, working in venture firms that have a lot of money, but maybe didn't earn it like hardcore entrepreneurs have. And so I kind of worked that and made sure that I got real world experience. And this is one story I always put out there that couldn't have happened unless I used the martial arts overlay, right? The template that I developed through my training and my inspiration from Bruce Lee. So in 1991, there was a company founded called Equip with 50,000 in startup capital. It ranked #1 in the Valley. When they hired me in 95 to take it public, we sold it to PRI Automation for $250 million, which was a competitor. They bought us because they couldn't beat us. Then we ramped and we did some things. And then people asked, how did you guys sell a company with one patent for $250 million? You know, we have never heard of that before. And I started talking about the balancing of IA and IP and the ability to, you know, manufacture as well as develop. No one believed us, so we kept running the company. And look what happens in 2002. We sell the company again to a competitor for $500 million. Then we went off and did some other things. But the point there is that was the first use case, the test case of some of these concepts. And it worked out very well. Now, I didn't own that company. I built it for the owner, so they got to all retire. I had to keep working. But the lessons learned there were valuable. Next slide, please. So Business Warrior Training is a class I teach based on this. So one of the several initiatives and assets that I manage in my portfolio, there's companies and there's programs, initiatives. So I do a lot of outreach and teach a lot of underrepresented groups, right, how to run business. And Business Warrior Training is, if you guys want to learn more about it, please contact me. But it's just taking the Silicon Valley way, which is a unique warrior ethos here, martial arts, Ivy League MBA, and to make it reality based. And this is the concept which I recapped, and this is the another application of that. So if you want to learn more about that, please reach out. Next slide. Next slide. So the fourth industrial revolution is on us. And when I talk about applying these concepts, there's this crazy expanding market. I like to call it the mechanization of the internet. 95% of all the hardware and equipment is not connected to the internet. You know, Mark Andreessen famously said, software is eating the world. I countered that with saying, but yes, but it needs hardware to hunt and feed. And people have ignored hardware for a long time, and we can't do it anymore, right? All these collaborative robotic systems, you know, systems with a lot of high HMI, human machine interface, and I have a great example of that, are going to push us to our limits. So we really need to get back to the basics and understand how to develop integrated system, right? There's that yin yang symbol again. If you're a software person, you'd better learn hardware. If you're a hardware person, you better learn software, because the convergence of those two massive technologies is what we're seeing in modern day products. Next. The next one, we just talked about this one. Next. So AMG is another application. It's a company that I co-founded. It's called Applied Manufacturing Group. We're a company built by OEMs for OEMs. We have a very unique product development. So we're not just a CM, we're a system level CM. We have, we focus on mechatronics, robotics, and automation. And, we actually provide true OEM to OEM collaboration. So our customers are comfortable that we know how to help them design and build their products, because we used to be them. So we're ex-OEMs that went into the supply chain and created a new link. And that's and we're a partner, proud to say, with Voler Systems. And I'd love to talk to you more about it. If you guys we're an advanced manufacturing and automation solutions company. So if you have any problems or challenges in that area, please reach out. I'd love to help you with that. But this company would not have been possible without some of the inspirations and experiences I just talked about. Next slide. So it's all about next generation productization and realization. I don't even use the word manufacturing as much. I'll either say advanced manufacturing, productization, and realization. It's all the same thing. You need to productize this IP and monetize or fully realize it, and have the asset structure to do that. Because a lot of these products are AI based. Even a simple toy-looking product, which I'm going to show you in a moment, is more complex than robots I used to make when I was an engineer. So AMT stands for Advanced Manufacturing Technology, and in the course we teach that as in part of the combative section. Next slide, please. So we call, there's another research project I'm doing with some of the local professors around here. I do a lot of work with San Jose State primarily. And there's a business anthropologist, a professor named Chuck Dara. And I have been working on this project for years called the Fifth Paradigm. And if you look at how we've productized and produced products in the past, right, there was craft production in Europe. We know that. We went to mass production with Ford in the USA, lean, you know, as represented by the Toyota system. We're in this low cost productization and manufacturing mode, you know, overseas. And we're trying to bring that back. And so we believe collaborative productization is the next paradigm shift. And you have to have that balance of hardware, software, or OEM and supplier. So you need, the products are so complicated, you need to know as much as your customer does to help them build it, and about systems. And they need to know as much about supply chain. And so it's truly a collaborative effort. And there's if you guys want to learn more about this, this different way of thinking, please reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about it in detail. Next slide. So the world we come from, so it's not just Bruce Lee that's been an inspiration. The other big inspiration has been the semiconductor chip and equipment industry. And a lot of people don't realize this, but the factories that make a chip are the most complex manufacturing systems the planet's ever seen. Building a chip takes anywhere from 700 to 1,000 steps, and each machine, you know, one of these steps, some depicted here, are millions of dollars. Some are $200 million now. It's a crazy world that we grew up in, and it's still dominated by U.S. companies. It's one of the few companies that were dominated by, I mean, started by U.S. companies, still dominated 50 years later. And it's a $500 billion industry, and it took 50 years to get there. It'll be $1 trillion in the next 5. It's a story a lot of people aren't following, and people don't think of Silicon Valley as hardware, but this is where it all comes from, right? So this was another big inspiration in the way we design, build, and run companies, is leveraging all our years in this industry. Next slide. These are some of the high-tech pieces of equipment. When I was 20 years old, we were designing and building these things, and we didn't realize what we were getting into, but it's a great experience. Next slide. Here's I do want to spend a moment on here. This is the one-wheel skateboard. You guys might have seen it. It's a self-balancing skateboard. We call it the harbinger of things to come. You can't talk about the fourth industrial revolution without talking about this thing, because it's a perfect example of a toy that has, you know, industrial mechatronics, AI, and robotics in it. To have this thing balance you and give you the sense of flying, like you're snowboarding or skiing or surfing, is very difficult. And it took years and years of experience for us to build the first 100,000 of these for our customer. This went through one of my other companies, which was a productization company called Bright Lab. So when you see this thing flying around, it's industrial complexity packaged into a consumer product. It's more complex than most of the robots out there. Next slide, it just shows some more, you know, collaborative robots. That's the future, right? So it makes sense, if you're going to build collaborative robots, you should have collaborative value in supply chains. That's another one of those fifth paradigm things. Product life cycles. Go to the next slide, please. And process life cycles. These two things are key elements. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on process, but I did want to show you, after spending 40 some years building complex hardware and software products, there's 12 attainables that we came up with as part of this fifth paradigm study that all companies need to have. And one of them is you need to understand both, not just product life cycle, but process life cycle. So if you guys are interested in learning more about life cycle management and methodology, It's something that's very near and dear to my heart. Please give me a call. Next slide. And these are tier one customers to kind of show the kind of people we've been working with and we've had access to because of these alternative ways of looking at businesses and business operations. So Tesla, Google, these are people that are now reaching out to us because the products they're trying to build are complicated. And so there's a lot of collaboration going on at high levels. I just had a meeting with Apple today where they want us to do some pretty interesting stuff. Next slide. So that was it. I think I got done in time.